Welcome to Seekers and Finders, the podcast where we explore the infinite pathways to truth, creativity, and connection.
What I was saying in response to Phil, who said he had a real spiritual experience recently, then he said, "Oh, but it's a small one." I said, "Hold on. What they say in the theater, there are no small roles, and what we say in the spiritual world is there are no small spiritual experiences, because it only takes one little glimmer or little 2-second thing can open up a whole new vista for you and change your whole perspective."
On Monday night meditations or whenever it was, I had this feeling of bliss came over me, and a quiet, wonderful, warm, blissful feeling, and I'd never felt that before. And it lasted for a while, and I said, "Oh, this is real. This is not some kind of mental exercise."
So little by little, I think his teaching changed a little bit, because at the beginning was love, devotion, surrender, and then he introduced obedience. You had to obey, right? And I noticed also that love, devotion, surrender, of course, he was talking about the supreme, but love was to him, devotion was to him, surrender was to him.
Let's just call it what it is. We were in a cult.
There was a great man in France who was the translator of Ramakrishna, Mahanandamoyi, and he had a publishing company for spiritual books, Jean Herbert, I think his name was. And Haridas approached him to see if he could publish in France some books by Sri Chinmoy. So he said, "Okay, please put together a book of selection of texts from Sri Chinmoy." So Haridas turned to the New York people, and they put together a book called Light of the Beyond, with a selection of texts from Chinmoy. And so Haridas sent that book to Jean Herbert, and that book was on the cover, Chinmoy with the eyes like that, and a lot of pictures of him in the book, Sri Chinmoy demonstrating bliss, demonstrating joy, demonstrating power, all these faces, and him everywhere, pictures of him. And what happened then was that man said no. A true spiritual master wouldn't put so many pictures of himself in a book. And I remember in the very beginning when I joined, there was a little book in which he said, spiritual person will never go for name and fame and power and money and all this. And then little by little, we realized that he was actually going after name and fame.
The love, devotion, and surrender, we were supposed to please the Supreme in his own way. And you just did not know what that own way was. It probably had a few dollar signs in front of it. That was a real good way to please the Supreme in its own way. But for those of us who didn't have oceans of money, it's not clear, what that was. So you're always guessing. You're always trying to figure out what would make him happy. And you were thrilled when you made him happy doing something.
We have to be more discriminating, I guess, in the way we approach something. We can't just fall for the lie that seems to be predicated. The guru is just a small pinpoint of that whole thing. Here we go. Welcome to our show, everybody.
Hi.
Today, we're going to interview two former disciples of our guru. They're also friends of ours for many, many years, since we've known each other since the 70s. And we're going to talk about our experience in the cult and coming out of the cult, how it affected us later in life. So let us say hello to Phil. He's coming to us from the West Coast.
Yes.
And Patricia is coming to us from the country in France, right? You're not in Paris, you're...
I'm in Burgundy right now.
In Burgundy. Wow. I wish we were all in Burgundy right now. So, as I said, the topic today is going to be our experiences in the cult, how it affected us. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So,
Yeah, the thought I think that set this in motion was, what's the psychology of the cult follower? You know, what sort of things are in place where somebody would buy into the rather intense requirements of being in a group that commands most of your day and most of your thoughts, and like what kind of person does that, and what's in it for them? What's the psychology of all that? That I always found that really interesting.
Patricia, I mean, that's a pretty good place to start. Do you want to think about
I
answering?
think I think it's what was very different for each of us, probably. So I don't know. I was looking for something else in my life, and I really believed for a long time that I found something more extraordinary to live up to, rather than having like a regular life, going to work and having all the problems that everybody has. It was kind of uplifting, and exciting too, because there was for us a lot of traveling and a lot of inspiration for a long time, I have to say. Recently, I was looking for something else, but I was reviewing I wrote many books of my diary, and I was going through that, and I realized how much inspiration I got for a long time.
Well, what brought you to the center? I mean, how old were you when you first were introduced to Sri Chinmoy?
I was 23. And well, the story for me was I was very close friend with this man called Olivier Haridas. He got his spiritual name Haridas, and I had met him when I was 16, and he was a great musician. So we had a common search, and for him, he actually did some spirit things, like when you speak to the spirits and you have like kind of psychic experiences, and we were very fascinated by that, and he got a lot of messages and from great composers and things like that. And at one point the messages turned to stop doing this kind of game and search for God. So we were very interested in spirituality at that time, and we used to go to a spiritual bookshop and read a lot of books. It could be Christian books, it could be Tao Te Ching, Tao Te Ching, or it could be Indian spirituality, and so we were reading a lot of things. And it happened that we were not attracted at all by Indian spirituality, actually, because at that time they were the Hare Krishna movement, and we couldn't stand these people. We thought they were really crazy, with their bells and songs. But I was working in advertising, and in this advertising agency called Young and Rubicam, was an American agency. I happened to work with a girl. She was American, and she was really cool. She was really peaceful and inspired, and she was practicing meditation. And we became friends. And it happened that she was one of the very, very few disciples of Sri Chinmoy in France. So I started trying to meditate with her. And then my friend Olivier joined. And little by little, we were really inspired, and we decided to become disciple of that guru.
Was she a New York disciple originally?
She was in Paris at that time. She had been living in Paris for a while, and then afterwards, she left Paris and she joined the San Francisco Center.
I guess we know who she is, but probably we should.
Her name is Mary. Mary with long blonde hair. And actually, I managed to remain a friend of hers all that time because we kept contact and we're still friends, very good friends now. But we don't see each other, of course.
So, Phil, why don't you reinstate yourself?
Yeah.
We know that you talked about it on your last podcast, but why don't you let everybody know how you got here?
Yeah, I was in college, and a disciple was holding meditations on campus, little posters on the bulletin board, and I had done a little bit of hatha yoga the summer before at a chamber music camp, and I found it interesting, and that we did some deep breathing, and I thought this was something interesting, worth pursuing. And you know, in the rock and roll world, there was a lot of influence of India out there in the zeitgeist. You know, Jimi Hendrix's cover with the gods, with him as the primary god, and the psychedelia, which was largely a tribute, you know, to George Harrison bringing in Indian mysticism and music into rock and roll. So I would say that's probably the lead up. Without George Harrison, you know, I wouldn't be here today. Let me thanks, George. Mm-hmm. So Dhruva, Steve Hine held a meditation, and I went a couple of times, and he invited me down to Wilton to love and serve. And in a small room, there's John and Eve McLaughlin and Larry Coryell and his wife playing spiritual music, and I was 2 feet away, and I thought, this is very powerful. These guys can play. I never heard of either of them, and that. Very soon thereafter, on Monday night meditations or whenever it was, I had this feeling of bliss came over me, and a quiet, wonderful, warm, blissful feeling. And I'd never felt that before. And it lasted for a while. And I said, oh, this is real. This is not some kind of mental exercise, which would have been enough probably if it had been interesting enough. But Gary, you said something in one of your podcasts about how the path we were on was largely taken from Bhakti yoga. I don't know if you remember saying that or if it's true.
I remember saying it, and I'm sticking to it today.
Yeah, there, good for you. And that made a lot of sense to me. So it was the path of the heart. Of course, Sri Chinmoy talked a lot about the heart, and so I had that wonderful experience of meditation. I thought this was real. So I had a musical pull and also this nice meditation, and decided to get involved.
So I have a question now. We're all sitting here together as though we were at some function of Sri Chinmoy's, where he's about to come out on the stage. No, yeah. I'm serious, because the fact that the four of us are sitting here as former disciples, we do have a residual hangover, if you want to call it that.
Oh, definitely.
From the center, and I'm feeling it now coming across the screen. And actually, Gary had some get-togethers down in his house in Woodstock several years ago. And when we all got together, it seemed strange to me. I have to be honest, it seemed strange to me, because I think I had a different idea in my head of what it was going to be like. And I just wanted to be joyous and everything like that. Yeah. That aside, we've come several years beyond that. I have a different mindset now. But boy, joining the three of you on this podcast has made me feel like I'm sitting at PS 86.
Well, hopefully in a more comfortable chair. Yeah.
So, Patricia, how long were you enchanted, and what finally disenchanted you?
Well, it was gradual. I remained a disciple for a long time, 22 years, which is really, really too long. I have to say that the guru Chinmoy had a lot of charisma, right? He had a lot of something came out of him, and we were really enthralled because you would see his face and feel, his eyes and his smile, and feel so much. bliss, Phil said bliss, I would say my best experience was gratitude. I felt, for me, it was like a great meditation. I felt a lot of gratitude. It's like a form of opening of the heart. And so little by little, I think his teaching changed a little bit, because at the beginning was love, devotion, surrender. And then he introduced obedience. You had to obey, right? And I noticed also that love, devotion, surrender, of course, he was talking about the supreme, but love was to him, devotion was to him, surrender was to him, because he was representing the supreme, right? And then when obedience came, I remember we had to walk. We did what we call the walk path, or, we were walking on this tennis court, like meditating, walking like this, and we had to repeat and repeat and repeat again sentences like, I shall obey my supreme law, I shall obey, some things like that. And, and little by little, I felt that I had more and more difficulties meditating, actually. And I needed to go to New York to get inspiration again. And when I was about to travel there, I really didn't want to go. Actually, I had to adapt. Once I got there, I had to adapt to the situation. When I saw all these girls like this, like so devoted, and I couldn't really fit into that. But then something came from the guru again that gave me some inspiration, and then I was starting again. But I often felt a kind of spiritual stress, that we were always trying to reach something that was unreachable. Instead of, he was telling us the goal, like the Everest aspiration. You had to go higher and higher and try to reach something that you couldn't reach, actually. So it was frustrating, you know what I mean?
It sounds like the pure totalitarian regime, which in essence is a cult. So, I mean, we're having this experience now in the United States, among other things,
I know.
And so let's just call it what it is. We were in a cult. And that is the conversation we're having now. Had he been more open, I guess, Guru, the obeyance would have been not to him, but just to your own self-discipline, I guess, and your own growth.
Where maybe the question was, is it a cult or not? So we were kind of sued in France by some organization that was chasing cults, and we were part of the list, and it was very shocking for me. That happened in the 80s. Well, once we were organizing the peace run, yeah, right, where everybody was running with a flame peace torch. We were organizing. They were running. I was then in charge of a center in Lyon, which is a big city in France. And we were happy because the runners were going through town, and I had contacted the TV, and we were running with the peace torch, and really inspired. And then on TV, they came and they said, this is a cult. And it was such a shock, and this organization, the anti-cult organization, was after us. And we sincerely thought we were not a cult because we were not asked for money. Well, actually, we were spending a lot of money. Traveling, buying all that stuff. But we were not really asked to give our salary or something like that to the guru. So we thought that would protecting us from being a cult. But maybe, and then after I had left, I thought, well, actually, maybe it was like cultish movement, maybe a nice cult, not a bad one, like Scientology. But then after I came out of that movement, of that group, I realized when I got information about cults, other cults like Rajneesh, there was a very long movie about Rajneesh, which I saw, documentary, and others, they're all the same. because they all believe that they are special people, and they are in a special, they have the chance of a lifetime to live something extraordinary, and they are chosen.
Ah,
But
that's the
we
word.
thought,
They're
Very well
chosen.
said. That's very well said.
we thought that too.
Yeah.
Didn't you have love offerings that you had to send to the guru?
No, no, we didn't have to. But reading my books, I realized after a certain number of years, he wanted people, like he said, for instance, something like he wanted to lose weight, and for each pound that he lost, we had to give $1 or something like that. So something, maybe not exactly that, but something like this. It was so silly, and little by little we thought, why is he doing that? Because this weightlifting, lifting elephants, and all that strange things, and we thought, why does he need that? Yeah, that's an interesting story. At one point, there was a great man in France who was the translator of Ramakrishna, Mahananda Mohi, and he had a publishing company for spiritual books, Jean Herbert, I think his name was. And Haridas approached him to see if he could publish in France some books by Sri Chinmoy. So he said, okay, please put together a book of selection of text from Sri Chinmoy. So Haridas turned to the New York people, and they put together a book called Light of the Beyond, with a selection of text from Chinmoy. And it was first published in New York. And so Haridas sent that book to Jean Herbert. And that book was on the cover, Chinmoy with eyes like that, and a lot of pictures of him in the book, Sri Chinmoy demonstrating bliss, demonstrating joy, demonstrating power, all these faces, and him everywhere, pictures of him. And what happened then was that man said no. A true spiritual master wouldn't put so many pictures of himself in a book. And so he refused. And the book was never published in his publishing company.
Well, he was really in love with himself. I mean, the fact that he claimed and actually had it videoed lifting 7,000 pounds, and having the disciples that were there believing he actually lifted 7,000 pounds. Now, come on, you can tell the lie only so long.
Yeah. So we gradually realized that he was actually very much focused on his own ego, right? And I remember in the very beginning when I joined, there was a little book in which he said, spiritual person will never go for name and fame and power and money and all this. And then little by little, we realized that he was actually going after name and fame. And he wanted to be a famous person, and he wanted to have the Nobel Peace Prize. And
so you got discouraged and said, it's time to leave, right?
Well, yes, but it took me a long time to leave. You know why? Because I was so close with my friend, whose name was Haridas. And of course, our friendship was a little bit
flat.
Because we were disciples, we were not supposed to be friends, but we were friends still. And at one point, like in the beginning of the 90s, I told him, I knew he has doubts. I knew he didn't like the way the guru was feeding his ego all the time, and I knew it. And I said, I think I want to leave. And you know what he said to me? He said, well, if you leave, I won't see you anymore. That's the end of our friendship. So I stayed. Another few years, yeah.
And when you left, I know Haridas has passed, but when he finally left,
we were thrown out.
both of you.
Yes. Alors, the story was he was a great composer, and for many times, at least a whole length of 10 years, he stopped composing his own music. He was concentrating. He was always, doing musical arrangements on Chinmoy's music. But in the beginning of the 90s, he started writing his own music again because he really had to. So he was more into that, but he was still, the center leader. He was doing his job for the guru still well, but still his own music was becoming more and more important for him. And so some people said he was not such a good disciple anymore because he was not 100% for the guru, because he was writing his music. And in my case, later in 1995, I came back to Paris because I was living in Lyon, and then I had to live with my mother and my grandmother. And my mother was ill, and my grandmother was very old, and I got to have to take care of both of them, who became invalids and sick and ill. Not my grandmother, but she was just very old. And at that time, it was very time demanded a lot of time and dedication from me. And so I wasn't that present in the center anymore. I wasn't spending that much time going to the meditation and singing and doing all that stuff. And so I got to be criticized by the other disciples, saying that I was not spiritual anymore, but that was the best thing I did in my life, taking care of my mother and grandmother. And so at the end of that period, like in 98, suddenly Chinmoy, there was a meeting in Rome, and Haridas didn't go because he had a big concert of his music at the time. And I went, and Chinmoy called all the disciples from Paris one morning before departure, and he gave us a sermon. He started talking to us and saying, "Oh, you have descended. You have not lost your inspiration. You have lost your spirituality." And then he was talking to the Paris people, but then he started talking about individuals and said, "Oh, Haridas is not. He lost his spirituality," and he told me, "Your spirituality is zero." Me. So then I came back to Paris, and Chinmoy had asked me to write down all the speech and to read it at the meditation evening. So I read all the speech, but I avoided reading the personal remarks because they were quite personal and they were quite insulting. And then what happened is some stupid person in the center called New York and accused me of not having read everything, right? Having kept, and so the next day I got a phone call from Ashrita, who is like a secretary.
You got the call.
I got a call, and he said, "Well, I have bad news. The Paris Center is disbanded." I said, "What? What does it mean?" And he said, "It means the disciples are no longer disciples." But I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you didn't read out everything." And I have to say that the morning of the day before, I sent a fax to New York to Chinmoy with everything I was going to read out. So he knew. I informed him. And so they wanted to make me believe that it was my fault. So I was in shock. But what I did, I sent a fax to New York, to Chinmoy, telling him why I don't understand, because I did send you a fax with everything I was going to read, and I'm perfectly fine with my conscience. And so the next day I got another phone call from Ashrita, and Ashrita said, guru is very displeased with your fax, your letter. So what I did, I wrote another one in which I said everything that was on my heart. So I got a third phone call the third day, and he said, well, Guru said that even if he takes everybody back, he will never take you back. So in the meantime, Haridas was at his music festival, and he was playing his music, one of his sonatas, and he got the information. He got the news, and the people who were there said they thought he would break the piano because he was playing so powerfully and so loud. He was so in
Fortissimo.
Fortissimo. And the guy who brought the piano there was, he's going to break my piano. So that was the story. So I think he threw everybody out of the Paris Center because he wanted to get rid of Haridas and I. And there was like a plot against him, actually, and me at the same time. So later he accepted back about 15 people. There were about 40 of us.
That was an amazing story. Well, I want to say you said something early that it really I think is underappreciated or underanalyzed in the cult world, which is the word charisma. And Chinmoy definitely had charisma. He had this spiritual charisma. It's a quality that some people have and most people don't. Some people's charisma engulfs thousands and thousands and thousands, and others just a few. But to the individual, that charisma is real and strong. It's akin. It shares to me. It shares some of the qualities of being hopelessly in love with somebody. When you're hopelessly in love, you'll do crazy things. You do crazy things when you're hopelessly in love with somebody. And so that charisma engenders that feeling in the follower. But let me say this. Hearing your story, I was reminded he sure did like to fire people. He liked kicking people out, and that's as cult followers, I'd never experienced anything such as actual physical restraint. I maybe others have a different story, but I don't know of anyone being actually put in a basement like you hear in the Scientologists and made to clean toilets. I mean, we had to. People were given menial tasks, but I think any of us could literally have walked out at any time, and the peer pressure was very strong. You were getting peer pressure from the other people. Well, you can call it peer pressure. Others were snitching on you is what they were doing, but they were doing it because they thought that he would be happy with them. He wanted this network of little birds whispering in his ear, like they said in Game of Thrones, the little birds. I have little birds, and he certainly used that sort of thing because he knew he had charisma, and that was the main glue that was holding the thing together. The almost total focus on name and fame became very tiresome and became very exhausting to those of us who really took it seriously and were doing everything possible to get this guy's name and fame raised in the world. And how many times did and he had rather ridiculous ideas for how to do that, and he stuck by his ideas. He turned down some good ideas that Shambhu gave him, and he stick with his own ideas on how he was going to become famous. I've realized over the years that you can go into any bookstore, any spiritual bookstore, you will not find one of his books there. And of course his artwork is completely ignored by the world, completely ignored. And there's some strange little disciples who or teachers who get their books in spiritual bookstores, and with all that effort we put into it, it's really at zero. And at some point, you need to think that it's up to the leader rather than the terrible followers that just don't know how to manifest this guy's power. So the money was a very big deal. It may not have been enforced in any kind of technical way, but I certainly gave him. I had money from my parents and money that I was earning, and I gave him as much as I possibly could, to my detriment later on. But it was voluntary. I never had a gun put to my head and said you have to do this and that. So it was we were bought in, or I was bought into it. And I also got a call from Ashrita, which at the time was at the end of 5 years of just exhausting feeling like I wanted to get out if I could have snapped my fingers, but it just seemed impossible at first. Between the friends I had and what else? It was the life that I was leading. That I was leading. I really responded to Patricia what you said about how you really felt lucky for in your honeymoon period. You felt lucky and chosen, and you would not have traded your place for anything. When my mother got sick, and she died very young. She died at 63. I was still a disciple, and I may have asked permission to go visit my mother in her last days. And if I did ask, it was given. If he had said no, I might not have visited my mother in her dying days. I don't know. I might have done that. It's embarrassing to admit that, but I might have done that. Because keeping it, the love, devotion, and surrender, we were supposed to please the Supreme in his own way. And you just did not know what that own way was. It probably had a few dollar signs in front of it. That was a real good way to please the Supreme in his own way. But for those of us who didn't have oceans of money, it's not clear, what that was. So you're always guessing. You're always trying to figure out what would make him happy. And you were thrilled when you made him happy doing something. And you would glom onto the disciples who seemed to be on a hot streak. If somebody had a hot hand, you wanted to be associated with that person because you were really trying to. It was very hierarchical in that sense.
Oh, yeah.
And I was very aware at the second, what I would call if the Connecticut Center had A-line disciples, I was a B. At times, I was a B+ disciple of the Connecticut Center, which is not to say that's below the B- of the New York Center. And it was very hierarchical. And Gary and Stefan were, in New York Center. I don't know if you were aware of that, but boy, if you were in Connecticut or New Jersey or Manhattan, that was not the same as being in New York. So
aware of it, Phil. Hold on. We helped create that whole hierarchy. New York disciples, we love that hierarchy.
You rode that horse, did you?
You guys were down there. We helped create it.
We were the shit.
You were the shit. Absolutely.
I do want to point out something, though, at this point, to make everybody aware that's listening to this. This guru claimed to be the very last avatar coming to the earth. He was the highest avatar ever, last one coming to the earth. And he used to have he wanted to win the Nobel Peace Prize so bad, or the Nobel Prize for Literature. I can't remember which one it was. He wanted to win Peace Prize. Okay, so he wanted to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And he had his get up every morning during the voting sessions. 6 o'clock, we would meet at Dhruva's house, and we would sit there, all the disciples, meditating on him winning the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, if this guy was so endowed with great spiritual heights, and he had a connection straight to the main guy up in the sky, he had to know he wasn't going to win it, or he was able, with his adamantine power, to make it happen. And it never happened.
Yeah, slight correction. It started out, he was striving for the Nobel Prize in Literature, but when he got the kind of reviews that Patricia alluded to before with that parish publisher. It was clear that no way he was going to crack that nut, because his literature, when stacked up against real literature, fell woefully short. So then I don't know what the transition was, but then the whole thing switched to Peace Prize, and that was the main emphasis. But it started out literature, because I remember people were being pressed to write their college professors and anybody they knew to nominate him. Another, Megillah.
About his writings. I happened to get to translate a lot of his writing in French, because the French people don't speak English so well, and I'm rather fluent. So I did a lot of translations. Like every week, every month, we had a Joy Day, and I would bring a little booklet with, I was translating the aphorisms and poems, and so once I left, although he had personally told me that he was so grateful for all my translation work, but once I was thrown out, I was told that nobody wants to use my translations, and they don't. I offered them to the center. You can use them. No, we don't want them. I became like poisonous. So I had a lot. It was not like so much like computer time, when I didn't have everything on the computer. So I had everything typed on paper, and I was making photocopies. So I was here in my country house, and I made a bonfire, and I started throwing out in the fire all
You
these.
burned them. Oh
Yes.
my God.
Yes, all my translations. I burned them, but while burning them, I was reading them at little by little, and it seemed so empty. It was like an empty nutshell.
Yeah.
And I thought, why? What's that? It had no interest. Although his very early poems he wrote in India were beautiful. Like, in the book My Flute, they were kind of nice. I mean, not everything was bad, but these sort of aphorisms, like the flower flames, and and the aspiration plants, was that he was writing all the time, and reading them, I thought, well, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Nothing. Or it's so simple. I could make them up myself if you want.
But when you had the faith in him, you read them with a different take on them, didn't you?
Yeah, I guess so. But I remember once he told us that we had to read his writing for 1 hour a day, but we didn't have enough time for that. How could you do that? And listen to his music only. One day there was one little incident. There was this girl. Maybe I should mention her name, but she was a main person. She's the main person in France now, and she had the same kind of upbringing I had, like rather cultural, and and she loved classical music. She did piano and all this, and one day I saw her in New York, and I said, oh, I discovered this incredible music by Mozart. It's called Music for a Funeral Music, or something like that, by Mozart. And I was listening to it on my Walkman, and I said to her, you should listen to that. And she said, no, I listen only to Guru's music. So I thought,
the whole music, dealing with his music thing, was very challenging for somebody who knows anything about music, because there's so little to work with on that. And I've said elsewhere, Stefan, Gary, and Patricia, that the Indian music tradition developed rhythm in the way that the Western music canon developed harmony. So India's harmony doesn't exist, and in Western classical music, it almost doesn't exist. The things are either in 4/4 or 3/4, and there's they never went much with syncopation, and it was just it was right around the corner, that ba 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 ba, and you go, rhythm. Oh my God! And how much more is there? Another instance of that? Almost, maybe you get to Stravinsky, and you get rhythm that just grabs you. And Indian music, that's like, you do that on day one. And Chinmoy never did anything that showed that he came from the world's richest tradition of musical rhythm. No, there was nothing there. It was like
No, there was nothing.
it was just so plodding. It was so hard. It was so hard to do something interesting with it. And we weren't supposed to do stuff with it. We were supposed to play it kind of straight, and 18 people playing it in unison. Oy, oy, oy.
But it wasn't he bringing whatever he learned from the Aurobindo ashram, where he had other mentors, we'll say, who were doing the same thing, and he was basically there kind of copying their way because they were successful. He saw that at Aurobindo. What was the name of the writer that was from Aurobindo that was so successful there? Nolini, right?
Nolini, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think he was a pretty famous writer at the center. So, he was I would say he was an average harmonium player, maybe above average. But the rest of the instruments that he took up, and look, for everybody to know, Carlos Santana was a disciple. John McLaughlin was a disciple. Right. Larry Coryell was a disciple at one time. So he had these major musicians in his presence, and I guess he wanted to be like them, but his concerts were really difficult to sit through.
Oh my God! You know what? After Haridas passed away in 2000, May, and after that, I was friends with a great lady who was a very important producer on the French classic musical radio, and she was curious to see what Chimoine was doing. So once he came to Paris, he gave one of these peace concerts in Paris, and so she came with me to the concert, and he started playing and doing his, and she said, "But my God, how could Olivier stand that? How could he like that? How was it possible?" And she left. And he was actually terrible. He was very, very bad. Yeah. It's shocking because I couldn't explain to her. I said, well, I don't know. We felt something when he was playing, and it was like we received some inspiration, but musically speaking, it was absolutely nothing.
So all we heard was this scratch that the guru was playing.
Yes, yeah.
And then for the first time, I never checked it out before, this ex-disciple posted this classical S-Raj player, and it was like, oh my God.
Yes.
It was like his performance was like listening to Roseanne Barr doing, the national anthem at the ballpark compared to Pavarotti singing, La Boheme. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Did you see recently I posted on Facebook a video of a chimpanzee playing the piano? Did you see that? He was hitting the keyboard widely, and it reminded me of somebody.
Oh my God.
It's like you see some videos of elephants in Thailand, and they are given a brush and paint. And they paint like this.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
So, here we are now, umpteen years later, and I'm still feeling, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, residual ash, we'll call it, from the whole experience. But it did light a flame for me. And it seems to me, and I would ask you the same thing, there's a corner, a little piece in my heart or in my soul somewhere that still has that center thing going on with all the other stuff that I've investigated since then, but that is still the foundation for do the rest of you feel that way?
Okay, this comes up to me often when I see a movie about a horrible person, or watching the news now. uh, that I think, okay, so you're a follower of a powerful person, and that person turns on you and does horrible things to you. And there's some, I'm on the side of the person that's been wronged by the powerful leader, and a small part of me is saying, if you had just worked a little harder and been a little nicer, or figured out how to please that person in that person's own way, probably you could have avoided, the retribution. And to me, that's cult behavior right there. That you blame yourself for the stuff that's happened to you. You never blame the context or the bargain that you've made. I'm getting something from this relationship, but mostly it's about doing something that the leader wants me to be doing, or the stuff that the leader wants to have. And when things go wrong, it's not his fault or her fault. It's my fault.
So ask me a question.
Okay.
What did you get out of working so hard for him in all those years? Running the Smile. What did you get out of running the Smile?
What I got out of running the Smile was the great satisfaction of getting into a mode of serving, feeling like I was really serving people, at the same time serving, because I was a believer at that point. I lost my faith in 1976, but for the first 6 years, I got the feeling like, wow, this is great. I'm the divine instrument here. I'm serving people food. I'm entertaining them. I'm serving the highest avatar. Blah blah blah. So I got a real sense of like service, which that's a key thing, because service, I think spiritual life is largely about service to yourself, service to others. Of course, some would say there is no self and there are no others. Okay, that's another conversation. But we're talking, about everyday life. So the Smile of the Beyond was great for me, of course, but like anything else, it ran out of steam. And it's like, I was there. I was a true believer. I was a fervent disciple. I was running around doing all kinds of stuff. But then when the shit hit the fan and I completely lost my faith in the guru and what he was doing, then it was like, like the song Running on Empty. Then I was just like, for the next 4 years, I was just going through the motion. But those first 6 years were very rich, very, very rich.
It was such an important part of the culture, being able to go in there.
Yeah.
So important.
Did you give the money that was made at the Smile, most of it to the guru?
I don't know what percentage actually, because I made sure to keep enough for myself. That was, I made sure that I had enough money. But yeah, when I left the center after 10 years, I was $3,000 in debt on credit card. And I remember the day I left, the guru gave me $1,400 in cash. So I was still out about $2,000 or whatever. But yeah, I gave a decent percentage of money. But I lived pretty well while I was in the center. I can't complain.
What about the disciples that worked for you did they get paid?
Slave wages probably would be the best way to describe it. And yeah, I don't know who set the whether it was me or whether it was Guru, but yeah, they worked for like minimum wage.
And then they ended up giving the money to the guru for love offerings, I guess.
What they did was up to them. I don't know what they did. I just know what I did.
Wow. What a trip, man. What a trip.
For me, I don't feel like you say you still carry some ashes from that time. I didn't really feel hurt by being in the center and even leaving the center. I was lucky, maybe because I wasn't living in New York. I was like, on the other side of the Atlantic. I also had a regular job. I was working, I didn't like it, but I was working in advertising all the time. So I had a good job. I had enough money. And I've always been a very independent person. I'm very independent. So I wasn't too much caught in like this feeling of guilt or having to, I don't know. The parts I enjoyed the best were definitely the Christmas trips, the trips we made every year in all these countries, and singing also, because Haridas had conducted this Switch in Moy, the Song Waves choir. So it was great because we sang with him, and he was making those nice arrangements on the Chinmoy's music, and we did trips, and we gave concerts, and that was nice. And then even after leaving, when we were thrown out, was a shock, but it was a relief also at the same time. And from what I read from my diaries I was reading recently, I kept this feeling of a link with the Guru for a long time, because I thought, well, he threw me out of the center, but he didn't throw me out of himself in a way. So I kept thinking that he was there helping me, and of course, little by little, this disappeared. Yeah. But I didn't have to suffer like some people had, like, nervous breakdowns and things like that. So, no, it was okay.
Patricia, it took me a while to. I went through when I left. Initially, I felt he definitely is the last avatar of the age, but I just can't do this anymore, and I have failed. And then the next phase was, well, he's not the last avatar. He's not literally speaking to Jesus and Buddha, but he thinks he is. He's sincere. He really did think that. He really did think that about himself. So I'm giving him a little bit of a pass on that. My next stage was full atheism, and then reading some of the things that I've read from Rudra and others, that it was just a performance.
So I just want to clarify something. The ash that remained was a motivation, not there was nothing that I was sad about. I mean, I left on my own terms. I wasn't fired, so to speak. I wasn't kicked out. I left on my own terms with somebody else. And the remnant that was left was the good remnant. Of course, I speak now of all of the crap that went down because it's so many years later. But the person I left with, Linda and I, we followed the Guru for quite some time until it did reach a point where after we had come back to the center after a long sojourn, we came back to the center and we stayed as sincere seekers coming to meditations for just under a year. And at that point, the consigliere, Ashrita, had contacted us and said that Guru didn't want us to show up anymore. And I think one of the reasons was we were disturbing the peace. It wasn't a great situation. And, our kids really they weren't into it. So we just were told, best you not show up anymore. And at that point, after a while, it's become so old. It just it's like ice that eventually melts, becomes a wet pavement, and then dries up and it's gone. But the good stuff stayed. The good stuff's what's motivated me today. I think it in some way it helped motivate Gary to a degree. I may be wrong, but you're still a seeker, Gary, to some extent. So
Yeah.
am I wrong? Do you still have? I mean, it did turn a switch on for you, didn't it?
Well, yeah, obviously, and I've been very clear about this on a number of occasions that was my entree onto the spiritual path. I became a disciple when I was like in my early 20s, I guess. I had just been a spiritual seeker for a year or two when I joined up. So that was my entree to the spiritual life, and that kind of stamped me in a certain way. Certainly with the bhakti, I made a connection with the bhakti or devotional path in a very big way while I was there, and so that has stayed with me until today. I mean, I'm I've been on, once I got on the path, I took a few vacations, of course, but actually not for very long. I've always been on the path. I just went from then to some other teachings, some other paths, some other church, some other tradition, east, west, north, south, Christian, Buddhist, this and the other thing. And where I'm at today, yeah, I was set on the course by my years in the center. I mean, that's clear.
Did it give you a more nuanced sense of discrimination about, you know, how to look at a path?
One thing the center, my tenure in the center did for me was it tuned up my bullshit, my spiritual bullshit meter very finely. And even though I still joined other cults after that, I've been like in three or four cults, but always I've had that spiritual bullshit meter saying like, come on, man, don't you're going down the same road. So I'm pretty attuned to what
You,
appears to me to be spiritual bullshit. So I'm very comfortable with that.
you've been around the spiritual block a few times.
Yeah, three times.
Isn't there a 12-point program for that?
Hey, listen, I've been in 12-step programs for alcoholism, and yeah, I think that was that's another cult or cult-like spiritual thing. I mean, you can't avoid
Uh,
if you're involved in a spiritual path, you can't avoid cults. They're all cults. To a certain, some of them are bad cults, right? We could say Scientology, and I used to call the Chinmoy cult light because I mean my experience was not like those. Some of them I was not taken advantage of sexually or anything like that. So my experience was pretty good. Yeah, I have no complaints from my own experience, but there were others who came,
Gary, how would you
much more traumatized.
how would you compare it to the Martha Stewart cult?
The Martha Stewart cult was good because she paid me a decent amount of money to drive her around. So I like the Martha Stewart cult. But you're right. She had cult-like disciples too. You can't avoid it because you know why? Because 99, I might even say 0.9% of people are followers. They're followers. They're looking for that, whether it's Martha Stewart or Donald Trump or this guru or that guru. They're looking for that. They're looking for that because they don't have it. They haven't found it yet in themselves.
So we have to be more discriminating, I guess, in the way we approach something. We can't just fall for the lie that seems to be predicated, you know. And I mean, the guru is just a small pinpoint of that whole thing.
I would say that globally, I think that after I had all that experience, I think I probably became a better. I turned out to be a better person that maybe I would have been if I hadn't had all that experience. I don't know what kind of life I would have had, but certainly all that made me a better person, I think. And when people ask me, what did you derive from all this? The only thing I could say was that a better sense of feeling brotherhood or sisterhood with people. I'm very at ease with people. And actually, when I left the center, my best experience was to find out that the so-called ordinary people were great people, were very nice people. There were very, very good people in these people whom we thought were ordinary because they were not disciples. Of course, there are bad people too. But having the experience of meeting over the years with so many different people from many countries and seeing them as brothers and sisters, which we were, right? Coming out of that, I tend to, it's very easy for me to have a very open and kind relationship with people. You know what I mean? Because I don't see them like strangers.
I know exactly what you mean. And when Phil asked me the question before about what did I get from the Smile Beyond, I remember a very distinct. And I was standing in the middle of the Smile Beyond one day, and it came to me like an epiphany or a realization that because up until then we thought we were the chosen people, and the people out there, Guru referred to starving humanity. They were like, down on some lower level. I was standing in middle of the smile, and we had a lot of high school kids coming in and teachers from across the street, and I had the realization, like, just what you're saying, these people, in other words, the ordinary people that we were serving, and the disciples, no, there's no difference, no essential difference between them at all.
Mhm.
That these kids and these teachers are just as beautiful as the loving devoted disciples
Mhm.
who we were regarding as being like a notch or two above the normal ordinary crowd. That was a big realization for me, and a smile I'll never forget it, and stay with me throughout my whole career.
Mhm. Now I like to help other people, like the other day we had a small conversation. You called me and I was giving a class. I was teaching French to these foreigners in France, and I really, really, really enjoy that immensely. Gives me a lot of joy because I have the capacity to give something to them, and I would be unhappy if I wasn't using this capacity to be of service or help to people, and bring something valuable to them. So this is maybe my little my little piece of spirituality.
Well, that's what happened with me, I think. It gave me a true understanding of service that I never had before. And
Right.
it became almost intuitive inside of me, innate inside
Right.
of me, that when I would be working with people, especially as a photographer, I tried to offer my services as me serving them rather than them being necessarily a client. I was always trying to give the best that I could to give them the best product because I wanted to make them happy, and in turn, it made me happy to see them happy. So,
Right. Exactly.
yeah.
It's like when I started teaching French to these people, it could be immigrants or foreigners, and I first thought I was going to help the people, right? But I didn't realize how much I received from helping them. Really, it gives me a lot of joy. So I think my friends are coming in now.
Well, thank you very much for
Okay.
joining us, Patricia. It's been
Did,
a
did
wonderful
I?
conversation.
Lovely seeing you, Patricia.
Yeah,
Nice
lovely
to meet
seeing you too. I hope I said
I want to stay in touch.
what I had to say. I don't know.
Yes, you certainly did. Yeah.
Did I? Okay. I hope.
Yes.
You did, Patricia. You were
It was
wonderful.
very nice. Oh, merci. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful.
You know what? I'm writing a book of memories about my friendship with Harry Das Olivier.
Okay.
It took me about 24 years. I've been working on it for 24 years. And I had a big problem because I didn't know how to speak about the guru time, and so that blocked me for a long time. But I'm now getting to near the end of it. And I was really happy because I gave it to read to a guy, a friend who is a musician, a great violinist, and he knew Olivier Haridas, and I was a little bit nervous giving him my writing to read. And since that day, he's calling me twice a day to tell me how much he likes it. I won't say exactly the words because it would be bragging, but so it gives me encouragement. So one day maybe it will come out. It's quite big.
We'll bring you back when you have it out and we can all talk about the book.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Or as they say, thank you for having me. That's what you say in America, right? Thanks for having me.
It was my pleasure.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It was our pleasure. And as they say, I guess in French, à bientôt.
À bientôt, and good luck to you Americans, because we count on you to help us not know what's happening now. I mean, the whole world is at stake now.
So last Thursday, today is Saturday. On Thursday,
Sunday.
My wife and I were in Seattle because we provide childcare for our grandson on Thursdays. He's just a little over a year old. He's maybe 13 months old. He's pretty good at walking. He's pre-verbal. He's making noises, but he's not really talking much. And it was late morning, and it was just he and I in the room. And I'm sitting on a couch, and he's on the other side of the room. He's sitting on this little cart that my wife got for him, this little fire truck kind of thing. And he was sitting and against a cabinet, and with his finger he was tracing he was just rubbing it against the pattern of the wood on the cabinet that he was sitting next to. And I was looking at it, and the ordinary slowly became extraordinary. And when it started to happen, I was thinking, I don't know what's going on. This is nothing, but it intensified, and it became more and more extraordinary. He was tracing his finger on some wood. It was so beautiful, such a beautiful moment. It was definitely a different way of being in the world, and it lasted about 4 seconds. And then it slowly drifted away, and things became normal again. It was like the glow of some kind of higher, more unified way of looking at things seeped in, and then it seeped out again. And I'm still thinking about that, I'm telling you, I wanted to tell you about it. I was in the dentist chair the day after it happened, and I told the dental hygienist about it. I wanted to tell her. I don't know why why am I doing this? But I just wanted to share that. It was a beautiful, beautiful moment. And I don't know where it came from or why at that moment. Of course, there's no why and when. You just try to be open to it when it happens, I guess. I would love for that to happen again. And I don't know that it will. I don't know.
Well, as a father and as a grandfather, I can share that experience with you, because I think I certainly reached a point of unconditional love after I had children and grandchildren. And that unconditional love opens up a channel inside of you, and you can see when they do something, and that channel is opened up and you become one with them, it does become extraordinary. And it could last, just like you said, for 4 seconds, but it does happen. And I think it's that unconditional love that allows that symbiosis to, join with each other in that I mean, you entered into your grandchild.
Love has opened the door. Love has opened the door. Is that it? Is that the song?
Yeah.
Yeah. If I had been in an angry state of mind, or I didn't really care about my grandson, I don't know in what universe that would exist, but that probably wouldn't have happened the same way.
Well, you would have been distracted. You wouldn't have been. You probably wouldn't have. You locked in with him at that moment.
Boy,
and you had his experience with him.
It
Yeah,
was gorgeous.
Because
I'd love to have it back.
the experience they have at that age is one of wonder. So you're having that experience of wonder with them. I think that's the only way I can explain it.
Sure. No, good. Thank you,
Yeah.
gentlemen. Love, all joy, all joy. Gary, all joy.
All joy, good boy. Don't forget to add good boy. All
Good boy.
joy, good boy.